billion per year, which is going to be the cost for adapting to climate change for Pakistan. And unfortunately, I remember we had a lot of discussion, and we looked at 3 different models, top-down models to create that number. And we at that time we thought maybe we are sort of putting it on the higher side. But unfortunately, in the next 3 years, it just got proven right. We had 2 floods, 2010, then in 2014, which pushed that cost to even more than $10 billion a year. And this year, that cost has gone to $30 billion. This flood has given a paycheck of $30 billion to Pakistan that we have to bring out of somewhere. That's a huge, humongous financial cost for any country to pay. So this new triple planetary crisis was climate change, and then COVID had its own costs attached to it. Dealing with the COVID crisis, it came out of nowhere, hit the whole world, and people had to take out money out of health and education and development and push it into dealing with COVID. And because of these 2 issues, the third crisis which was developing was the debt crisis. And again, unfortunately, I don't feel happy saying this, that Pakistan is also amongst the top countries in the world who are facing this debt crisis today. But what the argument was that these 2 crises, which were unplanned, which were not of our own making, have now pushed us deeper into the debt crisis. So there has to be some relief given on the debt side so that we can deal with the other 2 problems. So that was the argument which was being done. Pakistan, in our government, we tried to shift the paradigm and we decided very early on that if we are to face these crises, and they're not going away, and they're not only in Pakistan, they're across the world, and the solution to these crises, one of the prime solutions is that we have to get off the war path with nature. We cannot keep on fighting nature and expect to win. It's not a fight we can win. When nature strikes back, no country, no system in the world can survive that. Climate change is because of an imbalance that we have created with nature. We have pumped too much gases into the atmosphere, which are hanging over there and changing our climate. Biodiversity loss, again, is because of an imbalance that we have created with nature. Even COVID happened because of an imbalance with nature. It was humans who, the world, Allah Ta'ala has created this world not only for one species. There are other species which are going to exist in this world. And there's a balance that has to be created. If humans push themselves into the areas of wildlife, and that is what happened, that we caught a disease which is basically wildlife disease. It was a virus of animals that humans got onto them. And it happened because we went into their habitats. So I think this imbalance with nature has to be balanced back. And we tried to do that in our government. We set off on what was called a nature-based solution development paradigm. And it was not just talking. We actually started putting our money into investing in nature and trying to trust nature to solve our problems. And I'll give you some examples. The 10 billion tree project, it was a globally acknowledged project, which was a very big target that we took on ourselves to start creating, stop the deforestation, start afforestation, and start investing in nature, back in nature. And we increased the budget of my ministry from 350 million rupees. The development budget when I got it was 350 million rupees. And we took it to 14 billion rupees. That showed the commitment of the government to investing in nature. That 10 billion tree project not only provided a paradigm shift in Pakistan's thinking, it created huge job opportunities across all of Pakistan. I just came today from Gilgit-Baltistan, and I was with the forestry department over there last evening, and I was very happy to learn that this project has created thousands of jobs over there. There are nurseries being created over there, which are being created by young people who can do other jobs, but also create these nurseries for the project. During the COVID time, almost they spent about 10 crore rupees on this project to create livelihoods for people who were sitting at home. And that created, a respite from them during the COVID time also. So the thing is that when you invest in nature, it pays you back, and it pays you back in a lot of different ways. So 10 billion tree was one project. We started expanding our protected areas. We created almost 50% new national parks in Pakistan. Two of the huge ones were created in the GB province. In Punjab, I think 5 or 6 new national parks have been created. All of them are going to create jobs through a national park service, through ecotourism, again, investing in nature and investing in a climate resilient future. When you invest in these wilderness, they act as sponges for for the climate shocks that you face in Pakistan, and it is absolutely essential for Pakistan to do that. And then we had started what was called the Recharge Pakistan project. That project is that, as I said, Pakistan faces this huge mass of water that comes into Pakistan during a 100-day period, and then it flushes down into the Arabian Sea. And after this water is gone, which is about 30 to 40 million acre feet at an average every year, which is about 4 or 5 times the water we store in Tirbela Dam. After this mass of water is gone, Pakistan cries that it is a water deficient country. Pakistan is not a water deficient country. We just don't manage our water properly. We get the water and we just flush it down into the Arabian Sea. So this Recharge Pakistan project was designed to use that water to divert these flood waters into natural wetlands that we have on the right and left bank of the Indus. There are about 14 of them. And those wetlands can revive through this water. They can recharge the groundwater aquifer and also create a climate resilient natural base for Pakistan to face up to climate change. And lastly, we started what was called the Living Indus project. This project was designed in the last 6 months of our government, and it started off when the head of the UN, he does a lot of research on this thing, and he walked into my office and he said that, yours is a civilization which has for thousands of years survived in this area because of one thing, and that is the Indus River. It is an artery that goes through the country, and that water is what is the basis of life in this area of Pakistan. And he said that it has supported livelihood and lives in Pakistan for thousands of years. But now there's a question mark whether that water can support life for the next 50 years. And he gave me reasons that we have treated the Indus like a sewage dump, right down from the north to the south. We just throw whatever we can into the Indus and we hope that it is going to disappear. It does not. That water is polluted. It is now the second most polluted river in the world. And there are other problems with this issue. So we immediately started working on this theme of trying to revive the ecology of the Indus. And we got the Prime Minister and all the chief ministers on board at the first step to approve what was called the Living Indus project. We got consultants to sit down and do the report. And that report has come out. It's an excellent report. It breaks it down into 25 doable items that Pakistan needs to do to make sure that the Indus River remains a living ecology. I think these are the solutions that Pakistan needs to focus on, and Pakistan was doing that, and it was getting globally acknowledged for it. At COP26 last year, Pakistan got chosen as one of the top 3 countries of the world which were termed as nature leaders. The other 2 were Gabon and Costa Rica. Both of those countries are countries which have been at it for the last 30 years to create that niche for themselves. We did it in 3 years. We got into the top 3. UNEP announced 4 forestry champions of the world, and Pakistan was the only one which was chosen from Asia to be a forestry champion of the world. So, and I think that when you talk about funding, this is the concept. Once you create yourself as a nature leader, even going to COP27 or COP28, that is the niche which was attracting financing into Pakistan. And it was not just words. We floated our first green bond in Pakistan, and that was done by WAPDA, $500 million for their hydro project. It was oversubscribed 6 times. because Pakistan has had a reputation for being a green leader, and people saw this as a commitment by the political government towards sustainable development. Similarly, the blue bond, we were working on that. We were one of the first countries which got a natural capital valuation done for the blue bond exercise. Our mangroves, our underwater seagrass, the World Bank did that report, and they valued it at billions of dollars. I was just reading yesterday that the government of Sindh has just signed an agreement. In fact, they've got their first payment for the mangroves as a carbon credit. It's about 3.2 billion rupees that they've got for the mangroves being there, not for cutting the mangroves, but for the mangroves being there and sequestering carbon and creating a value for it. We were also a country which had started negotiating with the World Bank for the first ever nature-based, and Dr. Saab would know about this, nature-based policy lending exercise. And we were almost 90% of the way there. We had decided on the indicators, and the World Bank was looking at around $1 billion to be given to Pakistan, not because it was a victim of climate change, but because it was a leader on nature work in the world. So I think, I personally feel that playing the victim card does not work. It has never worked. I've never seen it work on the climate change arena, but becoming a nature leader works. It attracts financing, it creates a niche, and it creates a vision for the future, which is in harmony with nature and also a sustainable development future.
I'll request my co-moderator, Dr. Hina, to ask a question about energy transition. But before that, during floods, all the international media who were contacting me for my comments, they had one question to ask, and that was, has Pakistan learned any lessons from the floods of 2010? And if they had, why they couldn't minimize the losses? Again, they were asking about why Pakistan was not able to materialize and implement on federal flood protection plan. And it starts from 2010 and it ends at 2012. During these 12 years, all the three major political parties, they have ruled the country. So one can't pinpoint any single government for not acting on a flood sector protection plan or not taking care of those lessons which were learned. So would you like to comment on it, that what could have we done differently? Or we should say that because the magnitude of rain was so high, even if we had this federal flood sector protection plan in place, we couldn't have avoided the losses?
I agree with you totally that the flood was unprecedented, the rains came unprecedented, it was a climate shock of the worst kind, but it got aggravated by governance failures in Pakistan also. The governance failures were, we were building where we should not be building, and we were building in ways in the floodplains that we should not be doing. The floodplain management plan is very clear on where we can and where we cannot build. We saw this in the north of Pakistan also, where hotels which were right in the middle of the rivers suddenly get washed away. That was not the fault of the river. It was the fault of that hotel person who built that hotel over there. And there were stories about those hotels being washed away in 2010 and then being rebuilt in the same spot. So that was a governance failure. Similarly, in the south of the country, the drainage issue was not addressed. We have the LBOD, the RBOD, which were planned out to drain out water, from the province of Sindh into the Arabian Sea. But when you start encroaching upon the LBOD and the RBOD and block the drainage processes, then the flood just aggravates the situation. The damage and the loss and damage from the flood just multiplies because of the governance failures. So I think it's time that we took seriously what is recommended by reports like the flood protection plan, because this is not the last flood in Pakistan. The climate change is here to stay in Pakistan. It has actually gate crashed into Pakistan. It's not going away very soon. We have to adapt our way to live with climate change. I've just brought this report. It's the country climate and development report. This came out by the World Bank just 2-3 weeks back. It talks about how Pakistan has been a star performer in terms of reducing extreme poverty. In fact, the best performer in Asia, all of South Asia. And it happened because of a lot of policies. And it actually has a curve which shows that between 2016 and 20, we actually bent the curve of extreme poverty. And because of a number of policies on the social side. But what it warns is that all these gains can get washed away by climate change. And it gives a very, very stark warning that climate change can affect between 6 to 9% of our GDP in the next 40 years. And if we add on the other planetary crisis, which is they talk about water stress and pollution, air pollution especially, then that figure goes to 18 to 20% of our GDP. So clearly, Pakistan faces a huge challenge in terms of dealing with these issues. And I feel that, and our government also not only felt that, but it put its money where in that policy is that we have to create a balance with nature. We have to give nature space. We have to create a new paradigm of development in Pakistan. And we were doing that in our government, shifting the government pattern towards sustainable pathways. It also talks about 3-4 areas in which we have to work out. One is agriculture. Agriculture is the mainstay in Pakistan's economy. Today we face, because of the floods, a cotton crop which has gone down. We face a serious food security problem because of the wheat. 30% of our arable land is underwater. It's not available for production. So we have to change our ways. We have to go towards climate smart agriculture, which means that we have to treat our water with proper respect and care and conservation. We have to treat our land so that we can get the maximum output with the minimum inputs. And there are ways of doing that now. There are countries who have done it. Even in Pakistan, there are pilot projects where some private individuals are doing it. But as a country, we have to do that. There is no other solution. I was in the US about 2 months back, and I was shocked actually to learn of one statistic that Pakistan's wheat, the storage of wheat is so faulty that almost 40% of our wheat, whatever is produced in Pakistan, gets lost. The farmers produce it, the land produces it, but it does not get to the table. And the reason is that the storage facilities are not up to the mark. They are not done in a proper manner. There are now ways of doing it which are not that costly, but some government has to do it, and I think that has to be done so that we can start compensating for this 30% loss of our arable land. And as I said, this is not the first time that it is the first time that the monsoon rains came in such a strong manner in the province of Sindh and Balochistan, but it is not the last. Climate change is here to stay, so we can treat this 30% land as being vulnerable to climate shocks in the future also. So with the demand going up and the supply going down on food issues, we have to reform our agriculture sector. So that's what's highlighted in this report. They also talk about urban areas. Urban flooding is a big issue in terms of the losses that occur in Pakistan. The drainage channels, storage of water, simple things can be done like rainwater harvesting, so that water is saved for the future when suddenly there is no water. And it is, it's not very difficult to do. We should not be building in the middle of drainage channels. The city of Karachi, the mangroves around the city, although the mangroves in Pakistan have increased, we are a country which has increased the mangroves overall because of the Indus Delta. That's an area which is protected by nature. I don't think we can claim any success because of our own intervention, but it just happens to be a marshy area where human interventions are not possible. And most of the mangroves are in the Indus Delta, and they have increased. We are the country which is the largest increase in mangroves in the world. They sequester carbon and they save us from storm surges. But in Karachi, the mangroves have vanished, and it was a natural defense to the rising sea levels that we now face in climate change. Those mangroves have vanished, and now we have buildings and housing societies over there. So these are the things that we have to start reversing, and I think it's very important that we do that, and that this report actually points out to these 2-3 areas, and it shows that if we don't, doing nothing is not an option for Pakistan anymore. If we don't do this, we can wash away 20% of our GDP.
Thank you so much, Malik Saab. I think very informative, and I must say that in your tenure, we have been working really closely together on the clean energy transition. And I remember you chairing our Network for Clean Energy Transition that we had launched 2 years. We're very successfully running it. So coming back to the outcomes of the COP27 and the sticking points that had been discussed, is one was the phasing down of the fossil fuels that started from the COP26, and then it's again continuing, especially in the face of the recent crisis, where we are seeing a lot of huge pressure caused by the Ukraine war and the fuel prices and all. So how would you suggest that Pakistan, of course, having the new policy on the renewables as well, and of course, having more investment coming in coal projects as well, how do you see a balance and a kind of a just transition that the country can make in the light of the challenges we are facing, be it the economic as well and the environmental, the climate, the climate change impacts that we have all witnessed this year? So what are your thoughts and perspectives on that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I think, we talked about nature and nature-based solutions. So that was one solid pillar of our government's policies. The other pillar, which was relevant to climate change, was a transition towards clean energy. And we were committed to that. In fact, in our nationally determined contribution, which is called the NDC report, that is put forward in the climate change COPs, Pakistan NDC was highlighted as one of the best NDCs in the world. Even in this report, I was just reading, it talks about the NDC, and it shares that it represents a shift towards an inclusive, innovative, whole of economy approach to addressing climate change, as one of the most innovative in the world. What we had done over there was we had set out targets. On clean energy, we had set out a target that we want to achieve by 2030, 60% of our energy mix should be clean energy. Half of it was to come from the large dams that we were constructing. We had started work on the 10 dams in Pakistan, which were going to produce zero carbon hydro energy in Pakistan. The other half was going to come through renewable energy that you talked about. And we were trying to remove the roadblocks towards renewable energy. Wind energy, almost 1,200 megawatts, which was stuck up for the last 10 years. Our government approved that in 2 weeks. And those 1,200 megawatts, through World Bank financing are presently in the pipeline. Similarly, we had tried to focus on a solar friendly policy, so that home solar net metering was started during that time, so that home solar can become a big portion of our renewable energy mix. So that, we picked up from the renewable energy policy, and we set out this target, and we were working towards that. What that showed was a commitment of the government towards clean energy. Secondly, we announced the first ever national policy on electric vehicles. And we were trying to push that. There were a lot of issues in trying to push that. Even as a cabinet member, I remember, Dr. Saab will bear me out, I used to fight that battle in the cabinet, and there were, big mafias who didn't want that electric vehicle policy to come in. But now it is, it is there. Just when I was coming in right now, I got a call from LUMS, and the students over there based on that policy, had started working on swappable battery electric rickshaw. and it's a very good project which produces brings in rickshaws, but which you don't need to charge. So you go to a petrol station, and instead of charging, you just swap the battery. It takes about 10 seconds, and you put in a charge battery, give them the recharged one, and then you're all on your way. So they were working on that project, and they said that now that rickshaw is ready, we have 20 prototypes, and they wanted to inaugurate that. So a lot of that thing was there. We were targeting that we would want to shift that policy stated that 30% of our vehicles towards electric vehicles in Pakistan. And on coal, we had decided that we were not going to put up any new projects on imported coal. I think putting up projects on imported coals like the Sahiwal coal power project is a really criminal for Pakistan. It is the agriculture heartland of Pakistan, and you're bringing in coal from Indonesia and Malaysia, and you set up that project up country in the middle of that agricultural heartland. You're spoiling the agricultural food basket, and that transition of coal from Port Qasim to Sahiwal creates a cancerous strain, and that is running right now.
Let us also welcome Madam Sania Nishtar. I think she joined about 10 minutes ago. First of all, I want to acknowledge, ladies and gentlemen, that Dr. Nishtar, she has joined us at a very short notice. I apologize, ma'am, that we couldn't follow up on our invitation properly. We never had confirmation from ma'am, but on my special request, she agreed to join. So my fondest gratitude to you, ma'am. While in this second last plenary of our 25th annual conference, we are talking of this triple planetary crisis, COVID, climate change, and conflict. And before you joined, we were discussing with Malik Amin Aslam Saab the climate change aspect of it. But along with climate change, I think all the three, they have increased the need for protecting social protection and improving social protection and social safety nets. So if someone asked me that whether Pakistan would be, the inflation in Pakistan, it would come down any soon, and I always tell them that I don't see it coming down at least for the next 1 year. And then they ask me what can be done differently, and I tell them that we need to strengthen our social protection and social safety nets, these mechanisms. And while you join us, and of course, the current government has actually, there is this policy consistency, and they are working on many of the initiatives that you started, and now you are also starting some in Punjab. So I just wanted to get your take on it, that do you think that social protection and social safety net mechanism in Pakistan, they need to be matured further? If yes, what can be done? So basically, I want a futuristic approach from you, that what is your vision, where you would like these social safety nets and social protection in the next 3 to 5 years' time, and what can be done to improve them?
Well, thank you, Abid, for having me over. It's always a pleasure to come to an STPI event. I mean, you talked about the triple challenges, COVID and its aftermath, whenever the aftermath is, and the devastation that it brings in its wake in terms of the multidimensional disruptions, which is the one. Secondly, the climate aspect, which I'm sure my former cabinet colleague Amin has covered extensively during this discourse. And thirdly, the conflicts and the inflationary pressures that are a result of that, and many other reasons. So I think the stresses for people are unprecedented at this point in time, especially the economic stresses for poor households. Inflation has hit them extremely badly. The situation has never been so dire. So clearly, social protection has never been more relevant than it is today. And clearly, any government at this point in time needs to look at a vision for social protection. So when our government was in office, as you are probably well aware, social protection and welfare was one of the priority areas. And our flagship initiative under that policy direction was Ehsaas. Now, whilst the government was in office, we were implementing the Ehsaas's first 4-year strategy. And that strategy had 6 time-bound outcome-based goals. We had programs aligned with each of those goals, 16 programs for 16 different vulnerable communities, aligned with time-bound outcome-based goals that were pegged into a strategy. It was a 4-year strategy because we started in 2019, and it was meant to come to fruition in August 2023. When our government ousted 80% of the targets in Ehsaas's first 4-year strategy stood achieved. The idea was to have the next 5-year strategy, and the next 5-year strategy was working towards a vision for social protection, which was called Ehsaas Vision 2047. The idea was to achieve social protection for all who needed it much earlier than 2047. We called it 2047, but we were aiming to achieve it much earlier than that by the end of social protection, about the second social protection strategy, culmination of the second strategy. And as you probably know, there was an extensive institutional infrastructure developed for that, a digital system, a delivery unit, execution arrangements. We completed a survey of 34 million households. We created an infrastructure to make that registry live by creating outposts in every tehsil. We tested our system during COVID. It served 15 million individuals in a transparent, apolitical manner. We invoked the mechanism again when an earthquake hit Harnai, the third time when IDPs were returning in the Tira Valley. So not only did we structure the programs, we also had a very aggressive reform, a governance reform agenda ongoing simultaneously, which was subsequently published just before I left office in a report called the Ehsaas Building and Rebuilding Institutions Initiative, which is publicly available. And all this happened, the structuring of the programs, the putting together of the delivery infrastructure, the aggressive reform happened alongside the COVID operations in which we were mired for almost a year. And during COVID, we were very conscious that we were looking at a landscape, an uncertain landscape. Therefore, we made our system adaptive and shock responsive and resilient. So to answer the question, yes, this is a very, these are unprecedented times when we're looking at a number of different risks. And yes, social protection has never been as relevant as it is today. Let me tell you that Ehsaas was not just a social protection initiative and a livelihood promotion program. It also aimed at building human capital. Because during times of shocks and during times of stresses, it is the most vulnerable that suffer. And as opposed to this, human capital is one of the strongest currencies which enable countries to survive in today's digital age. So we were very conscious of that, and there were specific interventions structured under the human capital development pillar as well. Ehsaas Nachuma, for example, Ehsaas school stipends, Ehsaas undergraduate scholarships. And while COVID was ranging, and while we were involved in cash transfer operations for 15 million households, we did not take our eye away from the other initiatives that had to run in parallel, which were aimed at building the institutional architecture, which were aimed at building putting new programs in place. So the survey of 34 million households was completed on time. Asas Nasho-Numa was rolled out in time. Many other interventions were rolled out in time. And I think that Pakistan needs a social protection initiative in place, a strong social protection initiative. It needs one that is resilient and shock responsive in view of the climate threats that will continue to loom. And I think that the strategy that we had, where we achieved 80% targets, was a very solid foundation for us to transition into the next one. And I genuinely feel that it was absolutely possible, entirely feasible, to deliver on the goal of social protection for all who need it, which was espoused under Asas 2047. So let me just stop here and give it back to you for any further comments or questions that you may have.
Yes, I think it is, you also mentioned these climate risks. And one thing that came to my mind about this climate risk insurance. So if we come up with some sort of disaster risk insurance mechanism, will it be part of our social safety nets, or will it be part of our climate change policies? And I thought that because two gurus are sitting here, one on climate change, other on social protection, so perhaps you can guide us better. That is there a space for insurance against climate-led disasters, which are, of course, man-made disasters, within this social protection paradigm?
Well, clearly there is space for an insurance mechanism to kick in. Which framework you place it under and which ministry you entrust this work to is besides the point. What's important is that it should fit within the overall direction within which any government views its shock resilient social protection mechanism. And I think that disaster management arrangements of the federal and provincial governments, the Ministry of Climate Change, and the Poverty Alleviation and Social Safety Division will have to work very closely to structure such an instrument. And of course, there are various ways of structuring such an instrument. Basically, you need an emergency financing facility, and that emergency financing facility could be structured through the insurance route. It could be structured through a financing route by the creation of a fund. So how you structure it and what framework you put it under and which ministry you entrust this to are secondary questions. But the creation of the system, the clarity of objectives, the transparency and the alignment in its operations is what's very important. Because in every emergency you have to do a couple of things. You have to, number one, update your registry, because you cannot take a flood hit tehsil and give money to everyone. So you have to update the registry. You have to update the registry very quickly, and we created the infrastructure for that. Number one. Secondly, you have to pre-position. In the case of droughts, you can even pre-position cash transfers. In the case of impending flooding, you can pre-position cash transfers. And in the case of certain other disasters, such as earthquakes, which you cannot foresee. Of course, you have to do the cash transfers after the disaster hits, but you need an execution engine, and that execution engine was also established. And then, of course, you have to you have to do an assessment of more lasting damages, damages to crops, damages to houses, damages to to livestock, to livelihoods, and the recent floods are a case in point. I have a small role in in this landscape. I've worked with the PDMAs of KP and Punjab very closely over the last couple of weeks because our chairman Imran Khan held a series of telethons, and he raised funds, and he asked me to design a payment system for the flood affectees, and we decided that we would use these monies for housing compensation. We had to design a payment system for it. We had to design a survey for that because I no longer had access to the survey that I oversaw over the last 3 years. So I had to work with the PDMAs to design a survey which was virtually turned around within a matter of days. We designed a questionnaire, an app, which was loaded onto course of the young men and women who do the compliance monitoring of schools for the government of KP. And in Punjab, we use the field force of the urban unit. We got them to go to the field. We picked up the lat longs and the geo coordinates, the houses that were damaged. And the survey was beautifully turned around. The information is all visible on dashboards in real time, in control rooms of both the disaster management agencies of both the provinces. And then we had a payment mechanism where we sent the coordinates of all the damaged houses to partner banks, and the partner banks designed accounts for them, gave them credit ATM cards, ensured that they collected their payments, which were fairly substantial payments. For a fully damaged house, we gave as high as 400,000 rupees out of the telethon funds, and they came and collected the money in front of CCTV cameras. So this is just an illustration of how important systems are, of how important transparency is, of how important it is to insulate your social protection operations from political interference, which has traditionally marred social protection operations for a very long time. And it was a standing principle in our government that we would not mix politics with social protection, that we would be totally apolitical in what we give and to whom we give it to, and that we would uphold transparency to the utmost. We demonstrated that in SARS, we demonstrated that during the very large operations of COVID, and in the funds collected through the telethon, we've demonstrated that as well. So that there were 3 pillars of transparency: the way the survey was conducted, with geo coordinates appearing in real time on dashboards, number one. Secondly, the payments in branches of banks, in front of the eye of the CCTV camera, where every person collecting money was archived. And number 3, the visual display of information through dashboards. So the government of KP has made public its dashboard, which drills down to every household. And the government of Punjab will be doing it, will be making its dashboard live within the next 48 hours.
Malik Sahab, the same question to you.
I mean, I strongly feel that climate insurance is the next big frontier. It is very important in the future that we face that climate change risk insurance schemes take root. And I would like to say over here that Pakistan was the first country, and we had signed an MOU with Germany in what they started. Germany started a climate risk insurance scheme, which they called, I think, Global Climate Shield. Global Climate Shield. And we were the first country, we signed an MOU with them, and we were selected as the first country to be a part of that pilot exercise. And I think that is really a very workable exercise. And I also feel that the loss and damage fund has to be linked with climate change insurance at some side, because the other side, which is to expect money to come from the polluters, in my experience, would be very difficult to happen. So the route that can happen is that climate insurance schemes start for countries like Pakistan. And I also remember as a minister, I got an unsolicited proposal from a from an insurance company, which was stating that we would like to insure Pakistan for climate change risk. And they were talking at the number that they were talking about that we would have to pay at that time sounded very high. But now when I look at the damage that climate change has done to Pakistan, that was probably a win-win opportunity. But I think I feel that this is very important, but it will only work if what Dr. Saba is saying is executed, which is to have a transparent execution mechanism. And I think the Asas program in Pakistan, the biggest contribution was that it created that database and that mechanism to take money right down to the most vulnerable and the most hit people in a very transparent manner. Along with that and trying to create a mechanism to assess the damages properly, if you can do these 2-3 things, I think climate insurance is something that can work, and I think the time for it has come.
Thank you very much, Malik Saab, and of course you highlighted the importance of climate insurance and through which somehow getting engaged with this global climate shield. I know that Dr. Saba was busy in a meeting and she joined us amidst a meeting. Dr. Saba, any final point from you if you have to give any advice, any suggestion to the federal government on this social protection, anything that you would like to advise?
I think it's important to recognize that social protection is, and I'm not even talking about poverty alleviation, which is a much broader agenda linked to overall growth, overall ability of governments to accrue benefits equitably to populations through institutional arrangements and transparent governance. I'm not talking about industrial policy and how it creates jobs. I'm not even talking about commerce and the impact it has on the economy and the rest of it. So poverty alleviation is linked to broader economic policy, but social protection is a subset of that. And social protection is not something you can box into into the narrow realm of cash transfers. You have to tailor social protection to the needs of different vulnerable groups. And that is what we did in Asas. So the needs of different vulnerable groups are very different. So if it is a 5th grade girl who risks not going to 6th grade because her parents cannot afford the rickshaw for her to go to school, which is further away, that household needs an education cash transfer. If it is a pregnant woman who risks giving birth to a stunted child who would be limited forever in today's digital age, that woman requires the supplementation of her special nutrition, which is what we did with Asas Nasho-Nama. If there is a student, a laborer's son who would toil on a construction site, if he didn't get a scholarship for undergraduate education in NUST University, that person requires an undergraduate scholarship. If it is a laborer who is going to sleep on the pavement in a December cold night, because he wants to save the 50 rupees that he earned that day, he requires a panaga and he requires a hot meal. If it is an orphan, they require an orphanage. If it is a housewife who only has 5,000 rupees and would not buy an extra bag of dal, she will benefit from Asas Ration Riayat, which is what we structured. So and I can go on and on with examples of the 16 initiatives that we designed. The needs of vulnerable groups are very different. You cannot just tick the box with one thing You have to structure programs for different vulnerable groups. You have to structure them by listening to voices on the ground, by not playing politics, by not being hung up on brands. You have to listen to people's voices on the ground. And pronouncing a policy and having a budget is just 10%. There is implementation diligence required on a day-to-day basis. On a day-to-day basis, the system in Pakistan is such that it is not going to hold a minister, a bureaucrat, any functionary accountable for a commission or a mission. You can do whatever you like and go away. There's no accountability. And therefore, things don't get done. Therefore, the implementation diligence on a day-to-day basis with the execution of programs is absolutely fundamental. And what's the most important is that you deal with people with respect. People are poor because we have designed a system for the elite. And when you go to them with social protection benefits, the last thing that you should do is to tell them that you're doing them a favor. What you have to tell them is that you pay taxes, indirect taxes on everything. And all that I'm doing as a functionary of the government is to return back to you what is yours. You must deal with people with respect. You must communicate after you listen to their voices and after you ascertain what they need. Social protection operations in Pakistan have traditionally been about politics, about names, about scoring points, and that's the last thing it should be. You're dealing with very poor and vulnerable people who are victims of the system, who are what they are because of the way we have designed institutions. In Pakistan, we have an elitist system because a small coterie of individuals have privileges enshrined in law. That is how the system is designed. That is why people are poor. And to turn this around will take a lot of effort. But in the interim, if we are reaching them with social protection benefits, the last thing that we should do is to be arrogant and to tell them that we're doing them a favor. We're only returning a very small fraction to them of what is theirs. And we must not play politics with social protection. Amin will tell you that when we turned around COVID assistance, of the 179 billion to 114 million families that, I beg your pardon, to 15 million families that we gave, the bulk of the assistance that went was to Sindh. Our cabinet authorized that. The Prime Minister was behind it. It was not my individual decision. I was barely the one recommending, but each member of the cabinet stood behind it and the Prime Minister authorized it. So please do not play politics with social protection. Please do things with humility. Please tell people that you're not doing them a favor. And we must have the magnanimity to build on what is there, not demolish. So thank you very much, Abid, for asking me to be part of your conversation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nishtar, for joining us. Any last words from you, Malik Saab?
I think I would just say two things. Firstly, as I said, climate change is here. It's not going to go away. So whichever government is in place should start listening to what our floodplain management reports have been saying for the last decades. We have to treat them seriously. Secondly, I think Pakistan will not be a climate resilient country unless we start, rebalancing ourselves with nature. So we have to trust in nature and we have to invest in nature and in nature-based solutions to make climate resilience.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give a big round of applause for both the speakers. This special plenary, as I said, was to present an alternative paradigm. The shadow cabinet what is it that they are thinking about these triple C crisis and some of the advices from them. And what is very heartening for me that both the speakers, they have actually recognized the importance of strengthening both our work on climate change as well as on social protection. There is a clear consensus that one could see among members of government and members of shadow government on sustainable development in unusual times, building forward better. And I think this is a ray of hope. Amidst crisis, only unity can take us forward, be it is unity within our borders or it is unity across borders and in the region. Thank you very much, Dr. Nishtar and Malik Amin Aslam Saab, for joining. Sir, Aisha.